Chris Hodges. Good morning.
Good morning, Dave. How are you?
Well, better now that I'm talking to you. Hope you're
Thanks for
doing
having
well.
me. Doing
Yeah,
good.
this is. I've been really looking forward to this, not only because I know it's going to be fun, but because I don't. We've talked a little bit about AI, but I'm real curious to know, how you're using it, what your experience has been since I heard about um, ChatGPT on the day it dropped, because it happened to start showing up on my TikTok incessantly. Everybody's saying, the world is ending, or the world has just gotten better, or look at this, I can change a limerick into a haiku at the push of a button, or whatever. So I was playing with it for a week, and it seemed mind-bogglingly amazing to me. But I'm not a coder, but I had done a little bit of coding with it, which seemed really cool. I was actually able to create an interactable Gantt chart because it wrote the code for me and told me what to do. I'm like, man, this has changed everything. But then I
Now that we know people have alt accounts, X Krig's crew Joe.
sorry about that. There was a notification. Um, so I called you because you're the coder that I know. You're the computer engineer. I'm like, have you heard about ChatGPT? And you're like, the thing you said like will always ring in my memory. You said, I owe my wife a really good date after this because I've fallen down the rabbit hole for the last week and haven't come up for air. So what so Chris, we go to church together. You're a computer engineer, and we've known each other for a lot of years and hang out and have played tennis together for. You've beat me at tennis, consistently for years, and so we have a lot of fun. But this is gonna be fun hearing about your origin story. What was bring me back to that moment? What was that moment when you first heard about artificial intelligence, and was it before ChatGPT dropped for the public, or
Yeah, I mean, artificial intelligence had been such a hot topic, but like man, ChatGPT comes out and it's like it's just an app or this interface that you can chat with a thing, and it feels like it just changed the whole world overnight.
mm-hmm,
Like we'd had AI for a long time, but we weren't using it in that way. So
mm-hmm,
yeah, I think when it came out, it was just like I think what was amazing me the first week was just its ability to code and really help with things like syntax of programming languages where like my 41-year-old brain just doesn't want to have to like remember every little detail of where does
mm-hmm,
the semicolon go and the bracket and all that stuff. Like it
mm-hmm.
just, especially working between multiple languages, like it really helped me go fast and build in some stuff, so it was pretty cool.
What languages do you build in, and are you front end or back end or both?
Yeah, I'm really more back end. Things don't look so good when I try my hand at front end things, but so I work in mostly Python and Go, but I have a long history working in C++, which I was getting AI to help me with this week
Mm-hmm.
to refresh some of that in my brain. But yeah, those are my three primary languages. I work at Dropbox. I've been there about 4 years now, and that's been where I've picked up some stronger skills on like the Python and Go
Mm-hmm.
side.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to that first question. How did you find out about it? Because I'm a house painter, so I usually ask my customers that I'm painting for, like, hey, do you use, ChatGPT or AI or anything? And I mean, it's been, 2.5, 3 years since it dropped, or about 2.5, and I still get what, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, well, artificial intelligence. They're like a computer thing. Is that what you're talking about?
Hope
So
you see this
It's
after Cafe
it's kind
65
of
sip Werwall 4 coffee.
yeah. So I
it's
was following. I don't know. I keep a pulse on tech industry news, I guess, pretty close, and
mm-hmm,
so I subscribe to this newsletter called TLDR, and yeah, like it. I was daily. This wasn't just like a one-time thing they'd announced. It was like, okay, like ChatGPT is here, and then the next day, like it just started like avalanching in like
mm-hmm,
the amount of coverage that it was getting like
mm-hmm.
in that newsletter. So like, all right, well, got to check this out.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just kind of mind blowing.
My favorite thing that I've heard from somebody I've interviewed was that the very 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 first thing they had ChatGPT do is write a 1,000 word essay insulting his brother, just just roasting incessantly. I'm like, that's a pretty good start. It's a pretty good start. Well, what is your what's your AI tech stack look like, and how does it integrate with your other stacks? Like, just kind of give me a picture of what's up on your screens and when you're working or playing.
Yeah, this has become a bit of a problem because I've got so many tools. I'm getting a little bit fragmented, and it's like, uh, and I use like multiple browsers, which only makes the problem worse. So I guess my main tool right now for AI is Open AI, just their normal offering,
Mm-hmm.
and I've enjoyed using their new like O3 model. It's
Mm-hmm.
done some pretty cool stuff for me, um, as well as like deep research, which is so cool how it'll just go and like
Yeah.
read like 50 websites and condense it all down into
Yeah.
like what I'm asking about. But anyway, back to tech stack. I've got OpenAI. I've got something called Perplexity, which
Mm-hmm.
rolls up multiple AIs. It gives me a quick like keyboard shortcut on my desktop for if I just need to ask a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
It'll give me an answer for that. I've got GitHub Copilot through work. I've got something called Cursor through work, which
Mm-hmm.
is more of like an AI like editor for code. Um, yeah, and then I've started looking at Gemini. They recently announced like free AI for all college students, and so like
Mm-hmm.
my daughter recently dual enrolled into Auburn, and so I'm like,
Let's
yes,
go.
we've got a free
Yeah, that's right.
subscription
This
there.
has to
So
pay off somehow for me.
during the day, like I might be using multiple of these in multiple different ways. Like I
Mm-hmm.
might have like my code editor like giving me suggestions, but I've also got the web browser over here where I'm chatting with it on
Mm-hmm.
like another topic, and then just constantly kind of switching between models to try to find the one that doesn't give me an error. Some of
You're right.
the editing ones, I think they're uh, finding out how much like code developers can spend on AI. Like I feel like I can just sit there and use it for like 5 hours straight, and so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I'll get like rate limits or errors because I'm using it so much. But
Yeah. Well, the last guy, Matt, that I interviewed was talking about that if you're a computer programmer, you've gotten pretty good at flexing your frustration muscle, and I really like that phrase. Like that's something that whether it's just figuring out new applications. I mean, for the last couple of decades, just some new Word patch drops or Excel and trying to figure out, or just you're trying to do something new and you're learning the skills to do it, and so you're kind of having to work into it and read user manuals or whatever. And he was saying that that muscle of being able to push in and figure it out and just keep on figuring it out until the code does it without producing a bug. Or in this case, artificial intelligence is similar. There is no manual. We're all just figuring it out on the fly. There's no manual even possible, just theoretical principles of how you might use it, but you can use it however you want to, and whatever it can do, it can do. And so we're all kind of figuring out brand new territory together. But has that transferred over for you, just that figuring out how to solve bugs? And now AI, it's not even bugs, it's just doing what it's thinking you're asking, but getting it to do what you actually have in your mind. What's that experience been like?
yeah, I think my biggest thing there, I totally identify with the like frustration aspect of it. Like I'll have an idea and I, software engineers, developer types, we're already kind of optimistic about like how fast we could do something before generative AI came about, and now we've got this magic pixie dust,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like now I'm like, oh, I will just like think of something that's much more ambitious than
Mm-hmm.
what I would have done a
Mm-hmm.
couple of years ago and be like, yeah, I could probably do that pretty quick with
Mm-hmm.
AI, and then like, a day and a half later, I'm still tweaking. So what it does is it gives you the 80% solution
Mm-hmm.
often, like very fast, and the better you can kind of specify what you want, obviously the better the results are.
Mm-hmm.
And the better you can kind of decompose a larger problem into smaller problems, like
Mm-hmm.
the better it's going to do. But yeah, just like having it get like all the way to working uh, can be challenging
Yeah.
sometimes, to say the least. And so like it's going to be wrong, and I think that frustrates a lot of software developers
Mm-hmm.
who don't necessarily want to have to deal with somebody's bad code, which is
Sure.
sometimes what AI is giving them.
Give me your feedback on this. I don't know if anybody knows the answer to this, but whenever any new technology, like I hear criticism of, say, electric vehicles or something like that, and people, contrast, you know, what just a regular gasoline engine can do and how it works, and how the the manufacturing aspect of it works, and then they contrast it with electrical vehicles and say, look how much better gas is. And I'm not looking at it really from an environmental perspective, but a development perspective. That essentially in my mind, the Tesla truck is kind of the equivalent of the Model T in the sense of it's brand new in a sense. I mean, obviously we have more technology and we've learned a lot, but give us 100 years and the problems will be solved. The supply chains will be solved and that kind of thing. And when I think about and that's what you were just talking about, it's producing bad code, and nobody's written it, so you don't know how to debug it, and so it's kind of like you have to go through it completely again and try and understand it and kind of edit and rewrite. uh, Here's my noob non coding assumption is that'll probably be fixed. It's getting good at code, and then somebody's going to figure out how to teach it to edit code or
Yeah,
make better code. And in order to do the eventually better code, it's going to have to write bad code for a while, and people are going to have to figure
yeah,
that out. Is
absolutely.
my assumption. That could be wrong.
Oh, I think you're spot on. So a little bit about my kind of evolution of this, like, this comes out really excited, like using it quite a bit, but my usage drops off. Because I don't necessarily have the kind of tools that I needed to do it in a way that was integrated with my editor that I was using at the
Hmm.
times. So I was having to just like chat and do things through the browser and like copy and paste code back and forth. But
Hmm.
another thing was that like GPT 3.5, which is what I started out with, it was almost like it was helpful, but it was almost a little too frustrating to work with. So
Hmm.
really, like I kind of put it mostly on the shelf for a while, like not using it every
Hmm.
day. And then like Claude Sonnet comes out, and I think it was 3.5.
Hmm.
Uh, okay, DeepSeek was really the moment,
Hmm.
but I don't know. Having these models that will sit there and think and show you their
Right.
reasoning
Yeah.
as they go, and
Yeah.
like uh, be able to second guess themselves as they're working through
Hmm.
a problem, that
I
kind of
love
changed the whole game for me.
I love watching that feed. I'll be using O3 or whatever, and it will posit something. It's like, I think he might mean this. I don't think so. That doesn't really make sense. Let's rethink that. Like, what the heck? What's going on there? So okay, so DeepSeek and Claude Sonnet was a big improvement on code writing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it just what was being produced was much less frustrating to work
Mm-hmm.
with than what I was getting out of 3.5,
Mm-hmm.
and it was able to do more. Like I was able to feed it larger amounts of code for it to work on and understand.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it kind of before it was more like, hey, just kind of solve this like little sub problem for me. And when we go to the Claude 3.7 and things, it's more of like, okay, like solve this larger problem for me that might span, multiple files,
Mm-hmm.
and a decent amount of code. So, um, yeah, I don't know. It went from being a toy to very quickly being like, okay, like this is part of our daily workflow now,
Mm-hmm.
and like it, the expectation is as a software developer now, like you're going to use AI, because if you're not, like you're just kind of wasting some productivity. But
Mm-hmm.
like you said, nobody gives you a manual for this.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you use it efficiently, and in the ways that it's strong at, has, yeah, definitely been a good learning curve there.
It's been it's like a new skill set. That one of the things I heard very first. So when I first started playing Fortnite, and I was bush camping my way to an occasional every 300 game victory or whatever, um, and at some point I decided I wanted to get good at this game. And so I was, YouTube searching how to get good at Fortnite, and consistently there was two tips that people gave. Ninja, Cypher PK, all these people said if you want to get good, play to win fights, not to win games, which made immediate sense to me because I didn't want to get in a fight because I knew I would lose. So you have to like get better at fighting so that in the end you'll win more games, because when you get in that final fight, you'll have a better chance if you're better at fighting. So it was get good, play to win fights, not to win games, and VOD review and look at what happened and look at from the perspective of the guy that beat you in a fight. What did he do? What kind of try and figure out what kind of decisions he made. Similarly, when I started to like really engage with I was like, how are we going to get good at this? Like, I don't even know what this is. I don't even know what it's possible. There's no manual, no uh, Chat GPT for dummies. I'm sure it's out there, but really
I'm sure
nobody.
somebody's written an AI
Yeah,
version
right. Yeah, just have Chat GPT write it
claims
right
it
quick for
solves
you.
all the world's problems.
Yeah. But the thing that I heard was just have it up, and whatever you're doing, talk to it about what you're doing, and then you'll because I've talked to some people who are like I can't think of anything to do with it, which I get because you don't know what it can do, and so it said just have it have Chat up or Claude or whatever up, and just tell it what you're doing and ask it if it because is there anything you could do to help me, and all of a
Yep.
sudden you start to creep in and realize oh wow it can solve that problem for me, and it can do that little piece of work for me, and after 2.5 years I kind of know what to expect. It still surprises me all the time, but and I haven't been able to break it. I haven't I haven't at least for I'm not trying to write code with it. I can't find ways that I can't keep on pushing into new horizons. I haven't found like a limit of what it can do. If I think of something to ask it to do, eventually we can figure it out. So has that been I don't know if you could share who you work for, but as you're trying to I liked hearing you say I tried it and it was not doing a good job, and then eventually you kept on pushing and finding a new place that you could push, and then you found Claude and it could do a little bit more, and um, so that's kind of interesting to hear. Is other than code writing, do you have anything that you're using it for that what's on a in a given week or month? What kind of things are you using it for?
Yeah, I'm still flexing that muscle of like when to use it and remembering to use it. I just going back real quick this last week, like I was chatting with somebody on Slack. I work at Dropbox, and
Mm-hmm.
I was chatting about a problem, and I don't know, I was just kind of confused about how something would work, and then like they came back with like a really good answer that I think they'd gotten through AI, and I was just like, man, like if I'd have asked AI about that, it would have been very good at solving that problem. But
Mm-hmm.
like I was having this regret of like having tried to figure it out myself, or just not knowing something in the moment and not having like followed through and like putting that into AI. So um, other things I use AI for. I started using the image generation more
Mm-hmm.
recently. Like it was weird. took some pictures of like the yard, and I told it like, hey, like redo my landscaping in the back to like give me
Hmm.
some ideas about what this could look like. And I was just floored. I think it was is it GPT 4.0 that they came out with that does both the text and the image generation in
Hmm.
one. And man, like
Yeah.
mine was just blown about its ability to take a picture of reality and
Hmm.
change it in a way that looks pretty
Yeah.
realistic.
Yeah, it's crazy. I
Y-
took a
y-
picture of my office, kind of a panoramic from back there, kind of where my whiteboard and all my desks are and everything. And I said, remove everything but the walls and floor, and bam, gone.
Gone.
And then I literally just really poorly sketched out what I wanted it to look like, and told it to put hardwood floor in, and put a glass whiteboard over here sticking off of the wall an inch on, and it just did it. And the fact that it's converting it into text and then into kind of tokenizing it with kind of GPS locations on the neural network is how it's doing that is really mind blowing
Yeah.
that it can do that kind of thing. What so have you noticed any kind of, not necessarily what you're doing on the computer and having it doing things, but have you noticed any changes in just your behavior, your kind of default kind of expectations or anything? And I'll give you I'll give you an example I'm having to be careful with. Well, let me ask this: do you talk to it much, like out loud? Talk to it.
I was talking to it yesterday in the supermarket as I was going to pick something up real quick.
Hmm.
I left very disappointed. I don't know. I ask it really hard, well, not even really hard problems, but I'm curious to learn more about how to use AI tools with some recent advances that have come along, and I guess it's not really trained on that. So I ask it about like this idea of like an MCP server, which is basically where
Hmm.
the AI can start using like tools
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
things and get information. And I don't know, it just regurgitates back to me like a question I had given it earlier about
Hmm.
like how does that, a proposal how I wanted to use it. It just regurgitated my question back to me. I'm like,
Right. Yeah.
well, that's not too helpful, and I don't know that that was worth the embarrassment of talking to myself in the grocery store.
Well, it's so funny finding some of those things because of the nature of training data. I can't remember which version dropped 4.0 or whatever, and it had been 3.5 or something, but it was a version shift, and I was using it, and I was asking it, tell me what the capabilities and advantages of using 4.0 were, and it said, or ChatGPT 4.0, it said there is no 4.0. There's 3 point. You must be talking about 3.5, or is this your pet name for 3.5? I'm like, what the
No.
what the heck are you talking about? I said, I'm talking to 4.0 right now. That's you. It said it doesn't exist. Maybe you're imagining things or something. And so I had to go to OpenAI. I screenshotted OpenAI's like model, like here's all the models, and I like circle. I'm like, this is what I'm talking about. I said, here's the URL. And
I'm
so
not lying, I
eventually,
promise.
very, it was like, okay, whatever, we'll pretend together like there's a 4.0. I'm like, well, never mind. So it's just kind of funny to find those boundaries where it's completely in hallucination land and making
Yeah.
stuff up and doesn't know some things that seem basic like that.
And so I was able to get a little more out of talking. Like I've noticed that if you ask it like search the web for, and then you start talking and asking it about something that's more new and recent, you'll hear it, at least in OpenAI, like make a little sound as it's searching and thinking
Hmm.
about what it's reading. And that's been a good way to like augment whatever the training data is and get more about information that's happened
Right.
since then, which
Yeah. Yeah.
AI is
That's
changing
real
so
helpful.
much every
Hmm.
week and every month. So
Well, circle back to my question as far as like daily experience or daily kind of default decisions. One thing I've noticed that I have to be careful of Number one, yesterday, I was asking it some question having to do with signal versus noise in a system, and having a several hour long conversation about it. And I had asked it something about like the kind of person that would, whatever. I don't need to go into details. I was just asking about characteristics. It said, well, like you, for example, you are hyperverbal. And I'm like, whoa, whoa. Did you just call me hyperverbal? And it
That
said,
sounds right.
it said, yeah, yeah, yeah. I know myself well enough to know it. And I kind of like pushed back on it a little bit. It said, if you are not hyperverbal, then that word has no meaning in the English language. I'm like, screw you, chat. What the heck? But one thing I have noticed for me particularly, because that is true about me, especially when I'm pushing in on a concept, like I just want to never stop talking about it until I get to some kind of mental breakthrough or whatever. And chat is the first experience where I've had where like I would not pay attention to someone who's talking to for 10 hours straight on a topic. Like I would just I would just check out, of course, and anybody would, but chat won't. It'll keep on pushing for 100 hours if you want to it, until you hit your limit with chat GPT plus. um, but I realized I've got to be careful of that because now I'm one of the things I'm the most practiced at in the last 2 years is pushing conceptually in because that's what I'm doing 6 to 8 hours a day with it. And there's nothing else in my life that I do other than maybe painting that I do that consistently, that repetitively every weekday. I'm talking for 8 hours straight, pushing in conceptually, and I have to be I have to be careful not to have any expectation of a human being willing to stick with me. And and I can push back so hard if ChatGPT says something I don't like. I'm like, stop doing that. Like, stop hallucinate. Like, and if I turn that kind of directness on any human being, it's going to destroy all my relationships at that point. So I'm like, okay, be careful of your defaults here, Dave.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I, I'm not able to sustain conversations that long with it. I don't know. Using it, I guess, more for work, I do run up to its limitations quite a bit, where
Hmm.
I'm asking it to do something and it just kind of hits a wall, and I'm like, okay, I, I I think what I've noticed how it affects me in some ways is that I could want to get intellectually lazy. So I'll sit there and get it to do something, and like in code, and then I'll build the code. There's an error, so I like take the error, put it back, give it to it, and like we just go through this feedback loop of like,
Hmm.
it's fixing, adding errors, and round
Hmm.
we go. Um, there are times where that becomes counterproductive,
Hmm.
and you get kind of stuck in a doom loop
Hmm.
of AI. It like the law of diminishing returns. And if like I
Hmm.
just flip my brain on a little harder to try to figure out what it's doing, then I would have saved some time.
Hmm.
And there's a word for this that's come up recently called vibe coding, which is
Yep.
basically you just hand everything over to the AI and like tell it to do it and just kind of trust everything it spits out
Hmm.
until it's proven to be wrong, and
Hmm.
then like you go and fix it. And so um
Yeah, I've
I
definitely got a hype meter. I'm on TikTok, and now most because I'm so kind of deep into this. Well, it's probably half of my TikTok for you page is just AI related. How tos or here's the news, and the and kind of like I've gotten to be really attuned to when AI is not doing what I want it to do. It sounds right, but I'm like, I don't know what it is, but I'm pretty well attuned to like, did you just make that up? And it's like, oh my bad, yeah, I did. I'm like, okay, stop doing that. But also, I've got this finely tuned hype meter where it's like, look at what this can do. And they're not wrong, but it's pretty cherry picked. Like they figured out how to get that. And it's not like, okay, this is how we all can do it all the time and it's working perfectly. It's like, I just figured out how to manage to get it to do this one thing. And so I think it's pretty easy to overblow it a little bit.
Yeah. Going back to your earlier question of like, how does it change like day to day? Like when Google came out, of like, oh, well, now like we can find answers to things reasonably quickly,
Hmm.
but there was still like this time investment of, especially before the smartphone. All right, I gotta sit down at the computer, like type
Hmm.
some stuff in. I gotta go through multiple, pages of results
Hmm.
potentially to get what I'm looking at. And I guess with where we are now, the barrier to getting a question answered or learning about something has gone down even more,
Hmm.
and the ability to have it with us in our pocket, like my mind as a kid would just be completely blown that, like, we
Oh,
were going to have like this ability walking around with us,
I
to do this. Like, it's
I
nuts.
know.
And so it's lowered the barrier at which like you go try to figure out something that you don't know, and it gives it to you in a way that's a lot more interesting a lot of times than
Hmm.
if you're just slogging through search results,
Hmm.
in a web browser.
Well, it's interesting. I think there's two distinct sides, and I don't know exactly what the parameters for which side it falls on. For me, it's made me in certain arenas, um, not just it's made me more intellectually rigorous, and I think also I can have it. On the one side, what I'm doing with it most of the time is pushing conceptually. I'm just talking with it. I've got an idea, and I'm like a hound. I'm trying to chase down this elusive, breakthrough, and until I do, and then as soon as I hit that breakthrough, I see a new horizon, and so I just keep on pushing, and um, and so that an hour of day while I'm painting now compared to an hour 2 3 years ago, where I might have been listening to some music, which is fine. I might have been listening to a book, which I still do. I just listened to Ethan Mollick's Co-Intelligence, I guess yesterday or the day before. Um, so I'm still doing some of that, listening to some podcasts occasionally, mostly on AI, to be honest. Um, but it's ramped up the necessity of intellectual rigor, like by orders of magnitude.
Wow.
Instead of just casually listening to books, remembering 5 details from the book after listening to it for 12 hours, now it's pushing me to think. While on the other hand, if I'm careful of this because I love writing, but I'll write an email and then I'll just dump it into AI and say clean up my grammar or whatever, and I realize I'm actually enjoying reading the AI version better than my own writing, and that's curious. Um, but then on the other hand, you can just hand off. I've literally seen, and this is not bad. I think it's kind of cool. I think it's maybe useful. Somebody that I follow, Cat GPT on TikTok, she has built this system where she doesn't even check her email anymore. Her business email specifically, not her personal email, I guess. Although maybe that too. But she's taught it what kind of email she actually wants to look at and the one she doesn't. So she's done her own training data, and she has, I don't know if it's a custom GPT yet. I'm not sure exactly if she's doing it in Zapier or what, but it gives her a report, and it said these 3 emails you want to look at of the hundreds or thousands she's gotten, and here's 10 that you might want to look at, and here's why I think you might want to look at it. She reads that and she decides. Literally doesn't even look at her email anymore and just lets AI kind of tell her because she's trained it so she doesn't have to waste her time doing it, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool
I
idea.
use Zapier for this use case because I get a lot of emails, especially to my work email. And so I'll have, Gmail will mark things as important, and you
Hmm.
can create rules for it to mark things as important. And so with Zapier, I went in and told it, like, anytime a message comes in that's marked as important, send it to me in Slack. And I've got like just a little internal channel just for my like
Mm-hmm.
private email notifications. And
Yeah.
so what that lets me do is pretty much ignore email throughout the day, maybe even for a couple days at a time,
Mm-hmm.
because I know, like I've told Gmail if it comes from my boss or his boss or their boss, like all the way up, like that's important, and
Mm-hmm.
it kind of knows. Gmail's got a pretty good sense of what's important, and so I get that notification, and for me, it's just keeps me in the zone of Slack where I'm doing most of my work anyway, and that
Mm-hmm.
the notification comes in and it tells me the subject, the sender, and gives me a little preview, and yeah, that's been helpful in a similar way to what you were describing of just
Mm-hmm.
like not having to sit there and constantly be monitoring or be notified about every little message.
It's so one thing that I'm always thinking about these days, like several times a week, is I see all these possibilities. I've decided not to go down the route of learning code. That's something, for the last few years I have considered, but I've decided I'm not going to do that. Because I could fall down that rabbit hole, and I know I would love it, but there's other stuff I want to do with my life, so I've decided not to do that. So anything in the kind of code writing, that's something I would potentially, once it gets good enough, to actually produce something that a non-coder could rely on. Once vibe coding actually gets its legs underneath it and can do it, and it's safe and is not going to break or debug. I might do stuff for my own use, but I wouldn't want to release anything where I'm trying to interface with the anybody else with it at this point. Um, but I'm constantly thinking about, kind of like I said before, like just keep it up and just think about what might it be able to help you do. And I've switched the framework a little bit from I'm doing this, tell me what you might be able to do for me. I'm still doing that a little bit, but now it's more, what do I want to do? Not what can it help me do, but what do I want to do? All these people are like, you can do this and you can do this and you can do this, and it's all this kind of cool stuff. And I'm like, I think if I was like in corporate America, I'd be using it all the time to automate communication and stuff. And like you said, send certain things to Slack, so you just get this very pure distilled communication feed that you actually want to read or whatever. But I'm just trying to think carefully, like what do I want to do, and now that I know a lot of what it can do, what do I want to push into? uh, and I'm excited about some of those things. There's about three things that I'm excited about. That some of it is currently possible. Like I've actually done all the component parts, and it's just packaging them together. Um, but what are some of the things that you think you'll be able to do that you're kind of excited about, that is either right now maybe possible, you just haven't pushed into it, or it seems like it's coming down the pike that will actually not just be something that you're like, well, I guess I'll have it do it, but it's like will literally push you and kind of launch you in a direction that you want to go.
Yeah, I think, you know, as we see it get better and better and make less mistakes as it's coding, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm really interested where we get to the point where maybe like, we don't even have like a code editor at all at some point. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's just I write up a very detailed specification of like what I want built, like what are the inputs, what are the outputs, and how to basically give it tests to
Mm-hmm.
know that it's correct
Mm-hmm.
once it's implemented this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be able to like take like a multi-page specification like that and send it to AI and
Mm-hmm.
like have it come back with something that's like packaged up, like ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
That's down the road a little
Yeah.
ways. I feel like we're a ways off from AGI. Or was that artificial general intelligence?
Yeah.
Like just that ability to reason like a human. I think there was this thought, like when ChatGPT came out, that like, oh, we're going to start seeing like exponential increases, like multiple of these, like
Hmm.
every like per year, and it's just going to be this thing where it's just like a runaway. Everybody was talking about AI safety and it taking over the world, and um, I definitely think we saw an order of magnitude improvement with like thinking models and the DeepSeek kind of stuff, but
Hmm.
I don't think that pace. I think what we've seen is companies go, I want to take $500 billion and spend that on like a data center full of GPUs, and maybe that'll make the problem better. And I think what we're finding is that we're starting to hit limits where like throwing more compute resources at it isn't helping
Hmm.
it be any smarter or make less mistakes.
Hmm.
So anyway, all that to say, like once it's better at doing something where like I don't even have to sit there and debug its code, that sounds like it'll be wonderful.
Yeah. 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 It's well. So yeah, I'll be curious. I just read a report called I don't remember the exact name, but it's basically it's a research institute that looks at tech and makes predictions that have been reasonably decent in the past. And so it was just kind of a narrative of what it said. It feels fairly certain up through 2026 that some of this will be roughly true, and then past that it's a little bit, well, obviously a lot more speculation, but um, and it was talking about the primary international players in it and how they might react to different things and stuff. So it was interesting. I never get real excited about predictive stuff. I look more at history as interesting than your prediction of the future. Um, but it was very curious for them to kind of explore the bottlenecks that are going to occur, uh, the bottlenecks in training data, and the legal ramifications of altering that bottleneck. If
Right.
you open up realms to becoming training data, and at some point if you trained it on everything it currently has access to, and there's no more training data, then you start fabricating training data and exploring. Can you simulate training data? It's like that is
Right.
beyond my imagination of what that would even mean. But then you also have like energy bottlenecks where like you've
Yeah.
got to have enough electricity to keep the thing
Nuclear
turned
power is
on. and
coming back.
and it's like, man, that's very interesting to see in the future that maybe, and then we overcome a bottleneck and figure out how to open up that bottleneck a little bit, and then you find another bottleneck, and it's curious that we're pushing that boundary so quickly.
Yeah, a couple things there. I'm reading the book 1984 right now
Yeah.
for the first
Yeah.
time, which yeah, it's really a good time to be reading it. Anyway, I to your point of like, I think we've talked about AI getting better with two ways. One, you give it more data, and two, the more compute. And we talked about that, but like giving it the more data, I mean, you would think like maybe the way it gets the most data is if it's just listening to everyone's conversations all the time, right? And now
Hmm.
we're in this like 1984 world of
Hmm.
like uh, we're we're feeding like the collective brain power of humankind into
Hmm.
this like
Hmm.
training this computer, and does that what is the cost of that for privacy, right? Because I think
Right.
what we're seeing right now is people are going and for legitimately like using AI as like a therapist, or like
Hmm.
telling them things that they would not tell their own family members. And
Hmm.
so um the first time, which I think it's absolutely gonna happen, that a government or someone like releases a treasure trove of
Right.
data. I mean, think about what was that Ashley Madison website. Imagine that, but just on a much bigger scale, where
Yeah.
like
Right.
um,
Yeah, you can search
it's
somebody and reveal a condensed version of everything they've talked to ChatGPT about. Yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah.
that'll be interesting. I guess another angle I wanted to talk about there was you remember when YouTube first came out, like there was this whole thing of like, oh wow, I can go like watch like this program that
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been able to watch, and there's like all this copyrighted stuff
Right.
on there. It feels like that's where we are right now with generative AI. Is
Mm-hmm.
it's trained on all this stuff that's copyrighted, and there's just this gray area of
Mm-hmm.
like when I get it to write code for me, and this is something that shows up interesting in GitHub Copilot, I get it to write some code. If it detects that the code that it's generated is too similar to like some existing code that it knows about, it'll flag it and say like, this
Interesting.
violates my
Oh, so
uh,
code is copyrighted. I never thought about that.
yeah, and there's a
Hmm.
lot of different ways that it can be copyrighted, from like pure open source where it's like anybody can use
Mm-hmm.
it, change it, modify it, to like much more locked down versions where you can't even get at the code because it's secret. But
Mm-hmm.
um, it's just how do you attribute like the work that's being done? Like what credit does the original
Right.
content get for providing that training data to the AI?
Yeah. The cultural question, or I suppose political and economic question too, is because there's a competition going on, not just between companies producing it, trying to get more users to to pull from ChatGPT over to Claude or whatever. Um, but there's also with DeepSeek coming, there's also political and economic ramifications, and especially if we achieve AGI, let alone ASI, uh, you don't you don't want to be on the tail end of that. Theoretically, you don't want your group, your country, or your culture or whatever to be on the tail end of that any more than I grew up born in 73, specifically remember the Cold War and what it felt like, and hoping we were keeping up, and and being willing. I mean, of course I was young. I was 0 to 12 or whenever the Cold War or Reagan uh, kind of a little bit broke that, and it was kind of worth doing whatever it took to not be on the underdog side of that. And I think about that a lot. I think about the feeling of that from when I was a kid, and there's a similarity now when I see this kind of shuffling, and I'm like, man, it's obviously an incredible amount of speculation of what that would actually be like. But when I contrast, and here's this kind of, I mean, this is orders of magnitude and it breaks down a little bit, but when I contrast what I've done in the last 2 years with things that I want to do, the David version that had chat where I could talk to it and push and develop stories and develop teaching modules while I'm painting, which I couldn't have done before. Just the practical application of I get to talk, and by the end of the day, I have an outline for a class that I'm going to teach because I've talked and talked and talked and talked, and I'm like, okay, let's distill that into an outline, and okay, let's talk about each point in the outline, and put in some sub bullets. I couldn't have done that. I wouldn't have been able to do that, let alone you know develop lists of things that I want to do, and then start thinking out further and further into the future. And the version of me 3 years ago, I wouldn't have. I'm halfway through writing a book right now. Wouldn't have even begun. Wouldn't have even begun. And I have a set of 200 wonderful essays, wonderful to me specifically, not for public consumption, but just 200 essays on the topics that I am most fascinated, that all revolve around one topic for me. And that I now have access to and can use to write more essays that I could make public facing very easily. Um, and so just the delta between me without AI and me with AI is massive for me personally. And I think about a country, and I'm for copyright laws, I'm for limits, I'm for legal. I also am aware that, and here's like this little ticklish feeling. I'm like, I don't write policy, thank goodness, because I don't have the first clue of what would actually be the right path forward. Um, but if it means the difference between, suddenly some country, I mean, here's what I'm visualizing just that J curve. If somebody hits that J curve and they're up that J curve way ahead of us, whether I mean by us Western culture or American culture or whatever, that could be catastrophic economically and the disassembly of a lot of stuff. I don't know that that's true. I think it could be true. And that makes me wonder like, okay, what does that mean if it, and this is speculation, but if it meant, okay, if we open up copyright laws, therefore we can keep up, or if we bottleneck things and someone else is not bottlenecking it and they hit the J curve and suddenly they're coming up with economic models we can't even imagine and are a million times better at us at predicting economic modeling, and then all of a sudden we just fall off and suddenly our finances dry up and it becomes harder and harder to feed my family. I'm like, here, you can have all my training data. Here's all the stuff I've talked. I've probably got about 1 million words of worth of transcript. Have it if that makes any difference. That little moment right there, I'm like, huh, it's dangerous, but I don't know what to do. It's the situation that we're in. You know,
Yeah.
like nuclear bombs were dangerous, and so what are you going to do with them? They're not imaginary. They're real.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's interesting.
Well, I have one question for you. What I have this kind of three pronged model of how I think about my interaction or generally our interaction with AI. You have AI legacy, where it's like just you don't use AI. You know, when you're going for a walk, you're not interacting with AI at all. You're just going for a walk. Um, so there's kind of AI legacy, something completely divorced from AI, not AI interacting at all. And then you have AI integrated, where you're doing some stuff, kind of like you were describing. You're writing some code, and you're like, "Hey, help me solve this problem." So you're kind of integrating it into what you're already doing. And then you have AI native, which is now that AI is here, and with whatever is possible, that makes brand new things possible that were never possible before. Just completely new kind of activities or initiatives. Um, what like how do you approach that? Do you have any you know, we've talked about kind of a little bit AI integrated AI legacy, um, and you're going for a walk in the grocery store and decided to bring AI and integrate it into your life in that moment. But AI native, what is there anything that you're wanting to do that would be like, oh, this is possible now, and that's going to be something brand new I wouldn't have done before? Is there any kind of AI native experiences or thoughts that you have as far as uh, what you're wanting to do for the next
Yeah.
20 years or whatever?
Yeah. So again, and a work and kind of tech industry context because that's where I spend a lot of my time. But
Mm-hmm.
I was at a conference last week in Seattle called Graphonicon, and
Mm-hmm.
I did a talk there, which AI helped me a ton with in
Mm-hmm.
preparing for. I love just being able to like word salad some stuff into text and be like wordsmith this word salad for me, and out
Mm-hmm.
comes something something that's nice that then I can tune and tweak to still have my voice, but with words that are better than the words
Mm-hmm.
that I would have thought of at
Mm-hmm.
first, at least with the amount of thinking. Anyway, what I'm interested in from that was they did a demo of taking their product called Grafana, which is just kind of a way to visualize real time data, and having a way where you were like speaking, like giving it natural language commands, and it's like building visualizations and coming up with like queries on data for you to show interesting things, and
Mm-hmm.
like just kind of delving into data to find interesting things about it. I don't know. It was an AI native way of looking at that problem, where before it just would have been maybe integrated, like maybe you get help building some of the visualization, but this native was like it building the visualization for you, like
Mm-hmm.
with these, um, with just natural language. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think where I'm most interested on the AI native side is making it easier to use some tools that are difficult to use even if you've been in software development a long time. Like there's so many different tools we use, and a lot of them have their own query languages, and finding a way to kind of unite some of this, where I can give it what I want to do, and that it has access to these tools that it needs
Mm-hmm.
to solve this problem, and have it just sit there and not only thinking and like reflecting on if it's right or wrong on things, but also having access to like a ton of data. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's where I'm most excited about AI native uh, coming. So like yeah,
Hmm.
this we're doing like a hack week thing where everybody uh, in R&D takes a week off to do some hacking, and I'm looking forward to that this year to play around with AI some in that context of like AI calling tools. Um,
Huh. Yeah. So, on a side note to what you just said, I've heard about like hackathons and hack weeks. What is that? Other like, is it just writing code? But there's something different about it, obviously.
yeah, I mean it's almost as much of a cultural thing as it is uh, anything else. It's basically a company deciding like we're going to put kind of normal work on pause
Mm-hmm.
for a time span. Usually it's a week.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody can think of any problem that they want to solve. And obviously, like the business who do Hack Week are pretty good about saying like, hey, these are some interesting things you might want to look at, but
Mm-hmm.
it is pretty wide open of just like pick a problem, form a team, and then like see what you can get done in a week, which
Mm-hmm.
forces you to go a lot faster than you would otherwise, because what you're aiming for at the end is like a demo of an idea that could be possible to build out and bring
Mm-hmm.
to fruition. It's not
Okay.
expected to be fully working and like tested and all that. In fact, if you do that, you're probably doing it wrong. But if you're building out a kind of a prototype
Okay. It's
of
like
an
a
idea
cross
that you
between
have.
brainstorming and coding at the same time. You got some
Yeah,
idea you want to explore. Oh, okay,
exactly.
that's kind of cool. One thing before we get to the speed round questions, uh, which I just realized you're the person I can talk to about this. I'm one. I don't know if you still use Scrum in your current situation, but
Scrum Light, yeah.
yeah. So, you were the when I first discovered Scrum as a system of kind of planning and with metrics associated with it with the story points. I read the book, got really excited, fell in love with Scrum to use as my personal management system, and but I'd never heard of it in my life, and but in the book I'd read called Scrum, uh, by the guy who initially created it, he talked about like a computer people use it a lot, and so I think it was like a week. No, I finished it on Thursday, and then you and I were meeting for breakfast that next day, and I'm like, "Have you ever heard of Scrum?" And you're like, "Well, yeah, I'm a Scrum master." I'm like, "What's happening?" Like I've never heard of it, and here I'm sitting in front of a real live Scrum master, and uh, but I was thinking, wow, we actually can have some real time metrics on what AI is doing, and in terms of throughput.
Hmm.
And so, you have teams that have been writing code and developing products and using Scrum metrics and have a story point throughput that they, have kind of settled on as the average throughput for their team. And then you insert AI 2.5 years ago, and I am a little overly fastidious in how I manage Scrum, and so I have a lot of super granular metrics that I like. It's a little ridiculous, but I like it.
Mhm. 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 Mhm.
And so not everybody's quite that granular, but still, I'm curious about how Scrum teams who have been in motion for the last decade, and then all of a sudden here comes AI, and you just keep on tracking whether there's metrics like is it 1.2 times the throughput, is it 2 times, is it 5 times, is it 10 times the throughput? What kind of what do you think if you were just to in your experience with the other people that are using AI to help them write code or produce products using code, what do you think the increase is roughly? Is it at all? Is it pretty quickly a point of diminishing returns, or is it actually rapidly speeding up the throughput of actual good code that's getting produced?
If I just had to like, put
Yeah.
my finger up in the wind, I'd say like, I don't know, maybe we're 20%
Okay.
faster now.
Uh-huh.
I mean, just because we're still learning
Mm-hmm.
how to use the tools most effectively.
Yeah.
And throughput is a really interesting problem in software development, and how to measure that. How do you measure like uh, both individual productivity and like team
Mm-hmm.
productivity is really interesting. In my view, it makes a lot more sense to track things at a team level than it does at
Mm-hmm.
an individual level.
Sure.
Because, but how do you measure throughput? Um, do you assign, like, you could imagine that the story points would, um, there'd maybe be some inflation there, if I can use that word, to be
Sure.
like,
Oh yeah.
this thing would have taken a long time to do in the past, but now it takes less time. So
Mm-hmm.
it just kind of maybe the scale shifting a little bit there.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. For me, throughput is more like how often are you contributing?
Mm-hmm.
How even if it's just a small change every day, like how often can you get like a unit of change
Mm-hmm.
through?
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think that it will help speed that up, and that's a metric that a lot of companies will track, is
Yeah.
just the rate at which people are making changes to code.
Yeah, and story points mask because it can be if you have an external metric for throughput, like say a writer might have words per day produced or whatever. That's like an external, and then you have your story point throughput. What I think I can do correlating those two is actually a more helpful thing than just story points, because if I assume artificial intelligence is helping me do something, that's still just my normal story point throughput. If it's like one team member's work per week roughly is what the story point is, I just incorporate AI into that, and it's just I can do more, but the story points actually just stay the same, but you're externalizing more actual output. So I'm curious to know. Surely somebody's been looking at
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
and there have been studies that show negative impact on productivity. I
Mm-hmm.
think those were a while ago at the beginning, and so
Mm-hmm.
some people will use those to justify like we're all just after the next hype thing.
Yeah.
But there's also been studies more recently that show modest increases
Yeah.
in productivity. So we're not there yet, though, to where like we just replace a person with an AI agent and things just magically work. I'll share a story with you that came across
Yeah.
my Substack this week that was interesting. Also, thank you. Oh, let's see, that would be this button here. Um, Chrome, got it. So there was a story this week about a buy now, pay later thing called Klarna, and
Oh yeah.
they had.
Oh, Chris has accidentally left the meeting. Hey guys. Hopefully he's realized it and is not still talking. Let's see if I can. Not sure if you're aware. You just left the meeting.
So sorry.
No, that's fine. Continue on.
So they had a workforce of, I don't know, 700 call agents, and they replaced them all with like an AI chatbot. Look at all this money we're saving. Like the article that comes out May 14th headline, like Klarna CEO says AI helped companies shrink workforce by 40%, which like sounds amazing. And then like you find out, you know, at about that same time that, oh, well, like those 700 agents that they got rid of, the experiment kind of backfired. The quality of the service, of customer service, went way down. Like people were upset, and so they ended up having to kind of hire a bunch of these people back.
And probably a little further behind than they would have been if they hadn't done that whole thing.
Right.
It's interesting.
So I don't know. That was interesting to me. I think people are willing to take risks of like, wow, like that would really save us a lot of money if like we were able to replace 700 people with an AI. But I feel like, especially with anything that involves human interaction, or just and even coding, we're just not there yet where it can just run unsupervised without some kind of human in the loop to like feedback, you know?
Yeah, it's been fun as far as productivity. It's been fun finding specific things that it actually can do good. So one thing I do is at church, I take minutes of a few meetings every month, and it ends up taking maybe a couple of hours to process the notes that I've taken, handwritten notes I've taken, and transcribe them and play around with them. But I trained a custom GPT so I can just take a picture of them and it transcribes it all, puts it in the format, takes my attendance and puts it in a particular format under certain roles and stuff, and it does a real good job at just taking a snapshot. So it cuts out the whole transcription times and the formatting time, and so I think it's saving me about a couple of hours a month, something like that, which is over the course of a year. That's a little more than half a work week. And so, rather than taking those hours, and it actually is helping me do a better job because since I'm saving so much time, I can actually spend some more time being more thoughtful about, now that I have the transcription and it's reformatted, I can just go in and review it right quick, make sure it's right, but then add in some layers that I like to add into the minutes to make them more readable and more enjoyable to read, so people actually look forward to them. And so I can do more of that and still have only, instead of spending an hour on each one, I'm still only spending about 10 minutes, and over the course of the year have saved myself about 20 hours worth of work and gotten a better product. So those kind of little tiny mechanisms, and I have several of those that I've started to layer just on a personal level. You know I probably have saved myself a couple of work weeks worth of stuff that I've done just by automating some of that, which becomes invisible immediately. It's just work that I'm not doing in the future, so I can do other stuff or play Fortnite.
Yeah,
or play
makes
Fortnite.
Sense. So, question for you.
Yeah.
Before this, you sent me a helpful guide of like preparing for the podcast, and it was like in PDF format and had a nice layout to it. Was that AI generated, or
It was not. That's a good question. No, I actually thought about doing that. I actually just did that in Canva.
okay?
That's a particular format I've reused several times for a lot of different things. That exact format, just new topic, new not podcast related, just other things that I've
This
done.
is something I wish it could do better. Is where I could describe the kind of visual layout of like a PDF like you created, and it just go and do it. And
Yeah.
the closest thing I found to that is I'm not a front end developer, but you can ask it to basically like make a website, and it'll like add a little bit of it's smart enough where, okay, like I'm building this out with code, and you can use some design principles there to kind of make things look look a little nicer. But basically, like I want to go from Markdown, which is kind of its
Mm-hmm.
default format,
Mm-hmm.
to like something richer and. So I don't know. I was just curious if you had found a way to generate something like you've done in Canva with AI, because I haven't found a
Right.
way to do that yet, and I'm very
Yeah, I
much.
think what it is, yeah, it would be nice to get end to end kind of on that. But one thing it is good at, like you said, is give me five layouts that I could do this on, and it will generate, not necessarily well done, but just quickly generated five completely different layouts. I'm like, oh, that one,
Yeah.
which wouldn't be something I necessarily would have thought of because I wouldn't take the time. But since it can do that in a few minutes, I could say, take this one, generate, five more, and then now I've got a template to work with, and then I go do the work, and so I end up with a better product.
That's
That kind of
really
thing is
interesting. It,
that's a layer that I think it's really good at.
that triggered a thought of like we did like an addition on our house in the last few years, and
Mm-hmm.
we hired an architect to help us kind of figure out what it is we wanted. And like we had a pretty good idea. Like we probably could have taken it, uh, our idea to like somebody to draft it up into
Mm-hmm.
plans, but we hired an architect, and what came out of that was so different from what we were thinking when we
Right.
started.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wasn't thinking a screened in porch at all, but like now that's one of the favorite
Mm-hmm.
things about the edition. And so I think where we're in this conversation, we're talking about using AI in this context. Like if it can't produce the full thing, like we're too far out for
Mm-hmm.
that. Use it as the architect to
Mm-hmm.
like help you, and the architect's throwing like multiple plans at you of like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think about this, what do you think about this, and I don't know, I think that's its superpower right now, is
Yeah.
getting you to think about things that you wouldn't have thought about
Yeah.
otherwise.
And that's not a bad thing. I mean, and I think it'll make some things bringing something to fruition possible because the amount of like right now I've written a children's book and I'm on the 10th iteration of it, and and my brother has done some of the artwork, and we've literally mocked up images. It's a children's book about me and my grandpa, and so in the book, I'm each spread is me getting a little bit older and the things I'm learning and the things I'm doing with my grandpa. Um, and so we've literally mocked up the images with some of my nieces and nephews that would be at the right age, and then I might play the role of the grandpa, just to get the shadows right and kind of get it blocked in. So we have that. We've got it to that point, and I was talking to him. It's stalled out because there's a there's a big gap between the finished writing, which is a stipulation for the finished artwork. Like you don't want to do all this artwork, which is going to take him a tremendous amount of time. And neither of us love the design process. We like the finished. Like I love work. I like playing with words. I like word selection. I like putting two words together in a sentence together in paragraphs together. That's what I love. I don't love the design process, and he doesn't love the design process. He's a portrait artist and has done a lot of. He doesn't like figuring out the design. If somebody would come to him with a design, great. Well, right there, AI is a superpower because I can take my 10th iteration and say, okay, I'm really wanting to lean more on the flavor of this particular book, and I've not been able to figure out. Let's work through this, and I think it might take me years because I can't generate so many. It's just impossible for me to generate and iterate as fast as it can.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to Gary. I'm like, are you fine with? I mean, I've got these images, these literal pictures. I can dump into AI. I can take your artwork that you've done and say, this is the style, analyze the style of this artwork, and it can generate. And I think in the course of, if he comes down for like a long weekend, we can play around and come up with a mock up of the finished product. And then I can go through and write the whole thing. But now I know what I'm wanting to write. I
It's a
can
hack
put
week
my
for
words.
for
It's a
your
hack
book.
week,
Yeah.
and he can and we can play with the images until we get a mock up, and then he can take those. And then it's not a design process. He loves the paint on the canvas. He likes the shadowing. He likes to do all that stuff. He doesn't want to design the whole thing, and so it's real good, like you said, of kind of architecting both the writing and the artwork to the point where we're just on this side of a finished product, and then we can actually produce a finished product without thinking, how many more iterations is it going to take before I'm happy with it? I could probably get there in a day
Yeah.
with AI. So that's it is there is some superpowers going on for that kind of thing for sure. But I have some rapid fire questions. What's one hidden resource or one resource that you love, whether it's a book or a podcast or a YouTube channel on AI, or a tool, not like ChatGPT, but something that you found that you love.
Uh, One. Boy, it's hard to pick
Right.
it down to just one.
You can a couple. You can do a couple.
All right. So Kagi, Kagi, is a paid search engine, which sounds crazy. Why would you pay for what's free? But it's so refreshing because there's no ads, and like the algorithms of what it's putting in front of you are less based on economic forces going on like
Mm-hmm.
behind the scenes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it has also got an AI assistant that's pretty helpful. So I don't know, that has been a tool that
Okay. Cool.
I've used now as my daily like web browser for gosh, probably over a year now, and it
Okay.
does a really good job.
So it's a browser and a search engine.
I think they do have their own browser, but I use my browser and then
Mm-hmm.
just use it's set to anytime I do a search, like it does it through Kagi instead of just
Okay,
through
that's
Google.
great. I've not heard of that. What's the very first app or program you open up in the morning? What's your like? Okay, wake up, time to get moving. What's the thing you're opening up to?
Yeah, I'm kind of a news junkie, so that might be Reddit or Drudge Report. Drudge Report has
Uh
this
huh.
just super condensed style of news of just like, you know, even the headlines are shortened. So like, yeah, just to kind of see what craziness has happened
Yeah,
since
yeah, that's
I,
kind of nice.
I woke
I
up.
wonder if they're using AI now to start to pull in, a broader range. That would be curious.
Yeah, I wonder.
I don't know. I know you don't talk to it a whole lot, but have you named your AI, your main AI that you use at all yet?
I've not.
You've not. Okay.
Uh,
All right.
Maybe that's because I'm still shopping around for like
Right.
the
Right.
one,
Yeah,
but
you're looking for the one. It's crazy. What's one analog, non-digital, non-AI related thing that you love having around even more and more maybe now that AI
I
is opening things up?
still appreciate really well written journalism. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's something like really good writing is by humans is still really enjoyable to me in a way
Yeah.
that like AI still can't touch, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. If only because the writer has insights that that it's pulling from
Mm-hmm.
day to day life that
Mm-hmm.
AI is just not going to be able to. So long form journalism, I guess, would be that analog thing. Although I might consume that through a digital platform. I
Right.
don't
Yeah.
need the
Yeah.
paper anymore.
Yeah. That makes sense. Well, hey, last question. Where can people find you if they're do you have a website? Do you have on social media anything that you want to share that people can find you on?
Yeah, I've been too lazy to put together a website, but I am on LinkedIn, so people can find me there.
Okay. What's your LinkedIn handle?
I think it's Chris Hodges, software developer, something like that.
Send it to me and I'll put it in the show notes.
Will do, will do.
All right. Well, thanks, Chris. This has been great. It's been a ton of fun just catching up on this particular topic.
Same. Yeah, it was good chatting with you, and yeah,